denomination, without getting too specific, is that I'm in relationships with many pastors across our country, and some of those are white pastors who I've come to learn like really have an interest and a heart for racial justice and reconciliation, and yet. So these are not political or partisan pastors, right? These are pastors who, in many ways, are concerned by what they see on the news, or concerned by the political rhetoric that they see, from the current president, and yet they have not necessarily known what, if any, role they have in their predominantly white setting in this work of reconciliation and racial justice, and I think that we have not always done a good service to pastors in those settings. We have lifted up churches like mine as the answer to racism within the church. We've said, if you can have a multiracial church, then that's the way to go. And I love the multiracial church, and I would die for the multiracial church. I am convinced theologically that what's happening in multiracial congregations is evidence to the vision that we see in the New Testament. Now, there's all sorts of problems that come along with that we could talk about as well. But I think by elevating this one model, we have subtly communicated to those pastors that there's not really any role for them to play. That if you want to be in the work of racial justice, you need to be in a multiracial church, or you need to be in an urban setting. That's where the action is. And I'm hoping that this book radically reframes that to say, in fact, if you are in a predominantly white space, you are literally on the front lines of the ministry of reconciliation. You have a massive role to play. You have the opportunity to disciple people that Dominique and David will never have the chance to disciple. And that's a really big deal and a big responsibility. And so I'm hopeful that a Christian leader could read this book, be convicted, but also be very encouraged to say, you know what, I've wanted to be involved. I just didn't think there was a role. Now I see that God has called me to this place. I'm not here accidentally. Called me to these people, and I can be about discipleship in a way that's going to lead our congregation into greater solidarity with the entire body of Christ.
Wow, that's profound and very much needed. So I pray that's what the book kind of unleashes.
It'll be the work of the Holy Spirit, if it does, for sure.
Both within our denomination and beyond. And so as somebody who co-authored an anti-racism resolution for our ministerium, can you talk a little bit more specifically about what you hope this book kind of animates within the ECC?
So if folks are listening and they're not a part of our denomination, the ECC has been in some ways committed to racial reconciliation and justice and increasing racial, ethnic, and cultural diversity for a few decades now. And so when I came into the denomination, it was with the great privilege of being connected with people like yourself and other friends around the country who are doing really important ministry, friends of color around the country. And so the danger of that, though, is that you have this denomination that is still predominantly white, but with enough diversity, enough ethnic, racial representation that those of us who are white could say, we're good. You know, I come to our annual meetings and I see diversity on the stage. I look on the website of our denomination, I see diversity at some of the highest levels of leadership in the denomination. Isn't this great? And there's a lot to be thankful there. No question. But again, if I think about where does the real work remain, it really is in our predominantly white spaces. You know, I think one of the ways that white people have been discipled by our society to think about race is that race is an issue over there. That the concerns about race, the injustices related to race, they're over there. What I mean by that is we don't locate those within ourselves or within our own white communities. And so if you want to be involved in addressing those concerns, you need to go over there, wherever there is. I'm hopeful that growing up, we're spiritually maturing in a way where we can more easily say, no, in fact, these concerns, these issues, these sins are much closer to home than I would have previously wanted to admit. I think that would be a mark of spiritual maturity, actually, to be able to take some responsibility and to say that we need to be more confessional about this. We need to be less programmatic, a little bit more repentant, have a little bit more of a spirit of lament about how we're thinking about some of these things, and to ask, how have our majority white systems and assumptions and cultures contributed and been complicit in some of the racial injustices that we see today, so that we can all be about this work together, so that we're no longer outsourcing the work of racial justice to our one love, mercy, do justice, right, mission priority, and instead see that priority as kind of championing this and leading the way, but calling all of us to be involved in it together, because this is about all of our discipleship.